Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio, the recap. These short recap episodes are recapping Monday's main show and encouraging you to take action as a result of what we were talking about. This week, I was super excited to have my friend and mentor, Daniel Priestley, on the show talking about podcasts. But rather than hosting your own, Dan has a theory that it's actually a great strategy to guest on other people's. Now, I think it's good to have your own and guest on other people's, but I can completely relate to some of the stuff that Dan was talking about. It makes so much sense. And I think there's a lot we can learn from that episode. So if you don't already know who Dan Priestley is, he's an entrepreneur, best-selling author, and international speaker. Starting with nothing, he built successful multi-million-dollar businesses in Australia, Singapore, and the UK. During our conversation, Dan shared a really interesting concept around the podcast pyramid. He spoke about how there are different levels of podcasts depending on how many downloads they get and how popular they are. And he correlated this to this 5 tiers and spoke about the strategy for starting off with some of those smaller podcasts to then work your way up towards the bigger ones. It's hard to get onto a tier 1 podcast, as Dan would describe, without having an audience and without ticking a few boxes in terms of your own profile first. So really, really good conversation to start unpicking where podcasts fall and what your strategy should be to get onto some of these shows. It would be completely insane not to have getting onto some podcasts as the take action for this week. And I think that what would be really useful, something that I'm certainly going to do, is I'm actually going to draw a pyramid. I'm going to draw a pyramid with my 5 tiers in it, and I'm going to put some dream podcasts in each of those tiers. Now, it's going to be a bit harder to work out, exactly which tier each podcast would fall into. But I think if they're on YouTube, you'll be able to get a rough idea in terms of the views. But if they are an audio-only podcast, you can go on something like Chartable and see where they rank in the charts in whichever country it is that you're wanting to grow your audience in. So for me, I'll probably be focused on the UK, maybe the US as well. And I'll be looking at the charts and thinking about which podcasts would be a great fit for me and which tier they fall into. And I think I'll have a few options in each of those. And then I'm going to get strategic about how I approach them. It can't just be a case of, hey, I want to go on your podcast. And I get that loads for Beyond the Bio. And it's really obvious when people haven't listened to the show before, which just frustrates me, to be honest. It really turns me off. But then when someone has listened to the show and they tell me which was their favorite episode and what they could bring to the table, and it's a really sensible topic that fits in with what we talk about on the show, then it's easy to say yes to them. So I'm going to be applying that approach myself when looking at other podcasts that I would like to go on. And, the benefits of going on other people's podcasts are really clear. You're going to have access to their audience. You'll be able to develop a business appropriate friendship with these people. But, there's so many benefits, isn't there, to being on other people's podcasts. So I'm going to get really intentional about this. I hope that you join me in being intentional about this too and create your own podcast pyramid. As always, let me know how you get on. I really hope you enjoyed this week's show with Dan. It was certainly fun to record. And if anyone has any ideas on any future guests that you'd like to see on the show, definitely drop me a message. I'll see you on Monday.